What if one day you stepped into a mirror and what stared back wasn't you, but everything you've forgotten? What if the other side showed your fears, your courage, your memories, even the future you haven't lived yet, and in your hand a single flower begins to bloom each time you remember who you truly are? Then maybe, just maybe, you've entered Mirrorwell, where dreams speak, and the truth isn't found in reflection, but in your heart. Lyra had always felt that the large mirror in the sitting room did more than reflect, it remembered. Whenever she sat beneath the flickering firelight, watching the glass shimmer, a quiet sense would stir within her, as if someone was waiting on the other side, whispering in reverse. That afternoon, as autumn leaves danced outside the window and her cat Shadow curled in her lap, Lyra once again found herself drawn to the mirror's glow. But today, something was wrong. Inside the reflection, the clock ticked backward. The paintings had changed colors, and Shadow inside the mirror had silver eyes instead of green. Lyra rose slowly, eyes fixed. She reached out. Her fingers didn't press against cold glass, but slipped into it, like dipping into still water. A soft chill rippled down her spine. She pulled back, then reached again. Her hand disappeared past the wrist. The mirror was no longer a surface. It was a doorway. And like being led by an invisible thread, Lyra stepped forward and passed through. There was no falling, no spinning, only a quiet slide, like drifting through a forgotten lullaby. When she opened her eyes, everything looked the same, yet wasn't. The fire still burned in the hearth, but its flames curled inward. The furniture was there, but laced in silver mist. And most striking of all, the mirror behind her had become a painting. The world she had left behind was frozen in oil and canvas. No going back, not yet. Before her stretched a forest stitched from light and mist, and beneath her feet lay a checkerboard path, huge glowing squares stretching into the distance, each one pulsed with its own rhythm, its own song. "You've arrived in Mirrorwell," came a warm voice behind her. Lyra turned. Standing beneath a glass-barked tree was a tall woman with crimson robes flowing like autumn fire. Her hair curled like flickering embers, and her eyes shimmered like molten bronze. "I am Lady Virel," she said with a knowing smile. "And you, Lyra, have been chosen as the flower bearer." "The flower bearer," Lyra echoed. "In Mirrorwell," Lady Virel explained, "every soul begins as a bloom, not yet opened. You stand now on square one. If you're brave and true, if your heart remains whole, you will pass through the next 7 squares and blossom into the Flower Queen." Lyra looked down. Beneath her feet was a white square rimmed in silver thread. Ahead of her stretched countless others, each with its own glow, color, and movement. Some radiated with golden joy, others shimmered like sorrow, and a few were as dark and silent as starless skies. Lady Varel reached into her robe and pulled out a tiny white blossom, soft as first snow, and placed it in Lyra'S hands. This is your soul flower. With each square you cross, it will grow. But be warned, each step will test you. Your mind, your courage, your heart. Lyra held the blossom close. It pulsed gently like a fragile heartbeat, and beneath her shoes the earth trembled, faintly alive, waiting. Go, Virele whispered. Take your first step. With a breath of firelight and wonder, Lyra stepped into the next square. The world changed around her. She now stood in the garden of speaking blooms. The flowers murmured and sang, each voice like the wind wrapped in color. A red peony whispered, a new root. An orange tulip giggled. Will she weather the storm? But Lyra didn't bristle. She simply asked, why do flowers speak in this place? A violet bloom answered with soft pride. Because here, even silence finds a voice. The flowers swayed in a hush, then offered her a riddle. What blooms in silence, withers in noise, and shines brightest when hearts open? Lyra smiled. A memory. The garden shimmered in approval. The white flower in her hand glowed softly, growing slightly. From a gate wound with silver vines, a figure emerged. She was a woman wrapped in moon-colored silk, her hair as pale as frost, her eyes as deep as midnight lakes. Her presence was quiet, but vast. I am Queen Elowin, she said, keeper of what has not yet come. Lyra tilted her head. Am I dreaming you? Or are you dreaming me? Elowin smiled, sad and soft. Perhaps both. In Mirrorwell, dreams and truths are only a heartbeat apart. She leaned down and touched Lyra'S forehead with a fingertip of starlight. Guard your heart. In this realm, memories can be stolen. Lyra nodded. With that, she stepped into the second square. A golden archway opened before her, leading into spiral paths, echoing laughter and shadowy wonders, waiting to be named. The blossom in her hand pulsed once more. Mirrorwell had just begun. The golden arch behind her dissolved into light, and Lyra stepped into the second square. The moment her feet touched the patterned floor, the sky shifted hue from pale lavender to a deep indigo-like dusk settling over a forgotten dream. A soft wind swept through, carrying with it scents of pine parchment, and something older, something that made her heart ache, though she didn't know why. She found herself in a forest unlike any she had ever imagined. The trees were tall and thin, their trunks translucent, glowing faintly like memories trapped in glass. Their leaves were etched with symbols, moving symbols that shimmered and changed as Lyra passed beneath them. The air was thick with the sound of silence, not emptiness, but a kind of waiting. Her soul flower fluttered gently in her hand. "I'm still dreaming," she whispered. "A very long dream." No, came a voice behind her. "You are very awake in a place that sleeps beneath your world." Startled, Lyra turned to see a boy about her age perched on a branch above her. His hair was the color of ravens, but his eyes were pale gold like the edge of the sun. He wore a tunic stitched from parchment and bark, and his feet were bare. "Who are you?" Lyra asked. "I'm Thorn," he replied with a grin. "I don't remember where I came from, but this square has kept me for a while. It doesn't like letting people go, not unless they pass the trial." Lyra blinked. "There's a trial?" Thorn dropped to the ground without a sound. "Each square in Mirrorwell holds something that must be faced. Here the forest will ask you to remember something you've forgotten. And if you can't, it keeps a piece of you." That made Lyra's fingers close tightly around her flower. "What if there's nothing to remember?" she asked. Thorn gave her a sad smile. "There's always something. Mirrorwell shows you what the waking world hides." As they walked together, the forest seemed to shift and rearrange itself. Paths moved like rivers. Branches curved into arches, and light bent like breath. In a clearing, they found a circle of stones, each carved with a name Lyra didn't recognize, but somehow felt. One stone shimmered as she approached. It pulsed softly. Then a voice, her own voice, as a child, rose into the air. "I'll never forget, you promise." Lyra staggered back. A vision bloomed around her. A little girl, herself younger, was holding a weathered, stuffed fox tears in her eyes. She was saying goodbye to someone. But who? Then the memory dissolved like smoke, and the forest darkened. "You forgot something precious," Thorn said gently. "I didn't mean to." Lyra whispered, "I was so small." The forest responded with a deep hum, and suddenly trees around them twisted, forming walls. The path behind her disappeared. "Now it will test you," Thorn warned. "You must choose what to remember and what to let go." From the trees emerged a figure cloaked in shadow. It wore no face, only shifting fragments. Memories, regrets, questions, all swirling within its hood. In its hand was Lyra's childhood fox. "You abandoned me," the figure said in a voice made of wind and thunder. Lyra's breath caught. "I was only a child, and now you are not," the figure replied. Her hands trembled, but Lyra stepped forward. "I did forget. I let you fade, but you mattered. You taught me to hold on when I was afraid. I remember now." The shadow paused. "I remember," Lyra said, again louder. "And I am sorry." The figure dropped the fox. It dissolved into light. The trees sighed and uncurled. The forest opened its arms. Thorn let out a breath he'd been holding. "You passed." Lyra looked down. Her soul flower had bloomed wider. Its petals glowed with a golden edge now, and a soft hum pulsed from its heart. "I didn't know." "Remembering could hurt," she said. Thorn nodded. "Some memories are buried because they hurt too much, but bringing them into the light gives them peace." They walked in silence. The path before them, now clear and still. At the edge of the forest stood a bridge made of moonlight and music. Notes floated from its edges like whispers from distant lullabies. "This leads to the third square," Thorn said. "But I can't follow. Not yet. I haven't faced my trial." Lyra turned to him. "What if you never do?" He smiled sadly. "Then I'll wait. This place is patient." She reached out and took his hand. "Don't wait too long," he nodded. "And don't forget me." With one last look at the boy and the forest that held so much sorrow and truth, Lyra stepped onto the bridge. It lit beneath her feet. As she crossed the forest behind, faded into starlight, and ahead the third square waited, breathing, dreaming, calling her name. The bridge behind her melted into mist as Lyra stepped into the third square. This time, the world was quiet, not in the way that forests whisper, but in the way dreams hold their breath. The air smelled like chalk dust and lemon tea. The sky above was pale blue silk, dotted with floating punctuation marks that rearranged themselves every few minutes. She blinked. Two figures stood ahead, perfectly still, side by side. They were short and round, dressed in coats, buttoned far too tight, and wore hats so wide they could have been serving trays. Their faces were identical mirror opposites, and when Lyra took one step forward, they both turned and spoke at the exact same time. "You're early," "No," said the other. "She's late." "She's curious," the first insisted. "She's nervous," the second corrected. Lyra tilted her head. "Who are you?" The first bowed. "I am Echo." The second mirrored him perfectly. "And I am Mirror. We are the Echo twins," they said together, guardians of forgotten stories. They gestured toward a large, flat stone between them. "Have a seat," said Echo. "There's a poem you need to hear before you move on." Lyra hesitated, then sat. The stone was warm. Echo cleared his throat. Mirror adjusted his collar. Together, they recited, "The moon and the moth went walking one night, seeking shells and stolen light. They met a seal who served them tea and told a tale of what will be." Lyra furrowed her brow. "That's beautiful, but what does it mean?" Echo beamed. "Nothing." Mirror nodded. "And everything. It's a nonsense poem," Echo said proudly. "A dream turned inside out," Mirror added. They both leaned in close. And that is exactly what this place is. Lyra looked around. Where am I? In the square of slanted dreams, Echo said, where stories sleep. Mirror echoed. And you, Echo whispered, are about to meet the dreaming king. The air shifted. Behind the twins, a canopy of leaves parted, revealing a slumbering figure lying on a bed made of pages and lullabies. He wore a crown made of moth wings and a robe stitched with unwritten thoughts. His face was kind, but still too still. That is King Somnus, said Mirror. He dreams all of this, said Echo. And if he wakes, they finished together. Everything disappears, including you. Lyra took a cautious step toward the sleeping king. But that doesn't make sense, she whispered. Exactly, the twins chorused, smiling. She sat beside him. The king didn't stir. But the moment she looked into his face, a swirl of images flooded her mind. Stars falling backward, clocks melting into feathers, oceans running like rivers through libraries. His dream contains you, Mirror said softly. But maybe Echo added, your dream contains him. Lyra held her breath. The flower in her hand trembled. If I'm just a part of his dream, she whispered, then none of this is real. The twins' faces fell slightly. They sat beside her. Rial said, Echo is not always what stays. Sometimes, said Mirror, real is what changes you. And you, Lyra, are changing. Suddenly, a sound like thunder rolled overhead, though the sky remained clear. The king flinched in his sleep. A ripple of wind passed through the air. The dream is shifting, Echo said. He is uneasy, Mirror added. And then a rumble of laughter echoed through the trees. It wasn't kind. From the edges of the square came two shapes, round like the twins, but darker. They wore paper crowns and dragged with them a broken rocking horse. Their voices were sharp and sarcastic. We want the crown, they howled, and we'll argue until we get it. The Echo twins stood up. Those are the Shard brothers, said Echo. Half-truths and full-volume nonsense. Mirror added grimly. Lyra rose too. Do we stop them? We can't, said Echo. But you can. How? By not playing their game. The Shard brothers marched in circles, hurling riddles and contradictions. You're a dream inside a lie, inside a story, one shouted. You're nothing unless someone remembers you. The other cackled. Lyra closed her eyes. The flower in her hand glowed. I know what I am, she said, quietly but firmly. I am choosing this journey. And whether it's a dream or not, it matters to me. The brothers shrieked, meaning they cried. She brought meaning. The ground beneath them cracked. They vanished into smoke. Silence returned. King Somnus breathed deeper, more peacefully. The sky brightened. You've passed, Echo whispered, and remembered who you are. Mirror added. Lyra looked down. Her soul flower had opened another layer, pale blue petals now surrounded the glowing heart. "Thank you," she said. Echo nodded. "Dreams and riddles are only dangerous when we believe they're the only truth." Mirror smiled. "You saw past the illusion. That's the real trial." Behind them, a gate of mirrored glass appeared. "Through here lies the fourth square," they said together. Lyra turned once more to the sleeping king. "Will he ever wake?" "Only when all dreamers forget him," Echo said, "or when one chooses to stay." Mirror whispered. Lyra stepped toward the gate. Its surface shimmered like moonlight on deep water. Her reflection didn't look quite like her anymore. Stronger, steadier. And then she walked through. The next square waited, and with it, another layer of truth. The mirrored gate shimmered behind her like the end of a long breath. As Lyra stepped through, the world changed again. The air grew heavier, warmer, like a summer afternoon, soaked in honey and stillness. She found herself standing on a long cobblestone path, flanked by strange street lamps that bent toward her as though they wished to whisper secrets. This square looked like a quiet town lost between years. Shops leaned slightly sideways. Clocks floated mid-air, ticking in odd rhythms. And the clouds overhead moved backward, unfolding instead of drifting. From behind a nearby post box stepped a tall, regal woman with long silver hair and a gown made of stitched-together calendars. Her eyes shimmered with feu, and her expression shifted every second. Joy, sorrow, awe, confusion, and something that might have been wonder. "Welcome, Lyra," she said. "I've been expecting you since tomorrow." Lyra blinked. "Since tomorrow?" The woman smiled. "Time is gentle here, but forgetful. I am Queen Isolde. I remember what hasn't happened yet, and often forget what already has." "You remember the future?" Lyra asked, trying to steady her breath. "Oh yes," Isolde nodded. "And it's full of songbirds, unspoken apologies, and one very brave girl with a white flower in her hand." Lyra looked down. Her soul flower pulsed softly, still aglow. Queen Isolde walked beside her. "This square doesn't challenge your courage, dear one. It tests your patience and your kindness toward things that don't make sense." A low hum filled the air. As they turned a corner, a small shop appeared, narrow and wooden, with crooked steps and a sign that read, "Threads of Never Yet." "Come," said the queen, stepping inside. Lyra followed. The shop was stranger inside than out. Shelves turned in circles. The ceiling rippled like water. A cat with 3 eyes lounged on the counter, blinking out of order. An old woman stood behind the counter, her hair woven into a long braid that curled around her waist twice. She looked familiar, though Lyra couldn't say why. "We have no thread left," the woman said, "but you can buy a moment if you pay in memory." Lyra stepped closer. What kind of moment? The woman held out her hand. A glowing orb rested on her palm. It showed Lyra years older, reading aloud to someone in a bed surrounded by books and sunlight. "She needs that moment," said Queen Isolde, her voice softer now. "But the price is for getting a different one." The old woman nodded. "You'll lose a memory of when you were held very tightly on the coldest winter night of your life." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She didn't remember the moment exactly, but she could feel the warmth lingering. She stared at the glowing orb. Future comfort. A gift. "Will I still be me?" she asked, "if I let part of me go?" Queen Isolde placed a hand on her shoulder. "You'll be changed, but only things that grow must choose what to keep." After a long pause, Lyra whispered, "I accept." The woman closed her hand. There was no pain, just a soft wind inside her chest. The glowing orb vanished, and suddenly, the shop itself melted like a candle's edge. The shelves became oars, the floor became wood, and Lyra was sitting in a rowboat, gently floating down a river made of mirrored water. Queen Isolde sat across from her, humming a melody that bent time. "Where are we?" Lyra asked, gripping the sides of the boat. "This river flows through thought," Isolde replied. "Everything you've ever doubted is in its depths." Lyra leaned over and saw shadows in the water, versions of herself, afraid to speak, afraid to try, afraid to hope. Each one glanced up at her as the boat passed. "Are they me?" she asked. "Pieces," Isolde whispered. "But not your prison. Only your echo." They drifted in silence, the river stretching like a long sentence. Then Isolde began to fade. Her face blurred her voice like a record slowing down. "You're forgetting me, child." "That's all right. I forget myself too." "Wait!" Lyra cried, reaching forward. But the queen vanished, becoming a single silver feather floating in the air. The boat bumped gently against shore. Lyra stepped onto soft moss. The river behind her folded into mist. Ahead stood an archway made of braided wind and glass. The fifth square waited. She didn't know what she'd lost. She didn't know what lay ahead, but her soul flower had grown, and her heart, though aching, was wide open. The wind-blown arch closed behind her like a soft sigh. Lyra stepped into the fifth square and immediately felt the shift. It wasn't just a place, but a mood. The sky had flattened into a single tone of pale gold. The trees looked carved instead of grown. Everything felt deliberate, like it had been chosen. Ahead, sitting atop a rounded stone wall, was a figure unlike any she'd met so far. It was an egg, no larger than a pumpkin, but wearing a cravat and polished boots, he lounged like royalty arms, folded a small crown, tilted jauntily atop his smooth shell. His eyes were bright, but unreadable. "You're late," he said without turning his head. Lyra blinked. "I wasn't aware I had an appointment." "Everyone has an appointment with me," he sniffed. whether they know it or not. I'm called Orin. Just Orin, she asked. He gave a proud little nod. Orin the word-bound. I live in meaning. I wear it like a cloak. And you, flower-bearer, have wandered into my square, which means you owe me a conversation. Lyra approached cautiously. What kind of conversation? The honest kind, Orin said. About who you are. And what you think you know. She sat on a stone below him. That sounds difficult. Most true things are, he replied. But they're also valuable. Like rare seeds. Or good soup. Lyra smiled in spite of herself. All right, ask your question. Orin leaned forward slightly, his tiny boots tapping the edge of the wall. What is your name? Lyra. Wrong, he snapped. That's what you were called? Not who you are, she frowned. Then who am I? He grinned. That is the question. And then he began speaking in a strange rhythm, half poem, half riddle, as if the words themselves were alive. A name is a coat stitched tight with thread. It warms the living and cloaks the dead. But what lies under bare unseen is not just who, but where you've been. I don't understand, Lyra said softly. That's the point, Orin whispered. Names are not fixed. They are reflections. And in Mirrorwell, reflections change. Lyra touched the petals of her soul flower. It had grown fuller now, 5 open layers, the center glowing warm as amber. Orin watched her. Words shape the world here, he said. The wrong word can unravel time. The right one can open doors. He pointed to a path of floating stones behind him. To cross to the next square, you must use the right word. What word? He smiled. Your word. Lyra's chest tightened. I don't know it. You will, he said. If you stop looking outward and listen inward. The wind rose around them. Petals from unseen flowers danced on the air like drifting thoughts. The sky turned from gold to dusky rose. Close your eyes, Orin instructed, and remember who you've been without the names, without the stories. Lyra obeyed, and in the silence she saw a girl sitting by a window, hoping someone would come home. A child who gave her blanket to a trembling kitten in the cold. A voice that whispered stories to the stars because she had no one else to tell. Hands reaching again and again, despite being left empty. She opened her eyes. I am kindness, she said slowly. Orin nodded. Good. What else? I am longing. Yes, I am memory. And change. Orin's voice grew softer. And what do you call that? Lyra placed her hand on her chest. The flower pulsed brightly, then shifted. A word bloomed inside her, one she hadn't been taught, but had always known. Truth. Orin stood up, wobbling only slightly on his rounded base. Truth is your word, he said. Not the kind that proves or argues. The the kind that breathes. He waved one tiny hand, and the path of stones behind him lit up. You may cross. Lyra hesitated. Will I remember this? Oren's voice grew distant. The word will remember you. She stepped onto the first stone. It held firm, then another. Behind her, Oren began to hum a low ancient melody without lyrics. A song meant for no one, yet meant for her. The final stone glowed brighter, and just as she reached it, a crack echoed behind her. She turned. Oren had fallen from the wall. Wait, she cried, but instead of breaking, he dissolved into letters. Dozens of shining golden letters that floated upward into the evening sky. Each letter curled and spun, whispering things she couldn't understand yet. Her soul flower shimmered. Lyra crossed into the sixth square, and the meaning followed her. The sixth square was already humming before Lyra arrived. It pulsed with tension, like a harp string, stretched too tight, ready to snap. The air had weight to it, not from gravity, but from story. Wind stirred the edges of reality. Clouds moved in opposing spirals. Even her footsteps sounded louder than usual, as though the ground itself was listening. A grand bell rang in the distance, once, twice, then fell silent. Lyra looked up and gasped. Before her stood two massive gates, both wide open. One carved from onyx, one from pearl. And between them stretched a battlefield, though there were no swords, only shouts, no blood, only bruised pride. At the far end of the square, two creatures circled each other, like the hour and the minute. One was a silver lion, its mane laced with sparks of lightning, its eyes dark and heavy with knowing. It moved slowly, deliberately, each paw step like a declaration. The other was a snow-white stag antlers made of glass and gold hooves that barely touched the ground. Its eyes were wild, bright with fire and freedom. They moved in tandem, never touching, never stopping. Each time one stepped forward, the other circled. Round and round, locked in a rhythm too old to name. A voice beside Lyra startled her. They have been doing this for longer than even time remembers. She turned. A small man in an emerald cloak sat on a stone bench, polishing a cracked crown. Who are they? Lyra asked. The lion is wisdom, he replied. The stag is will. And they're fighting, he chuckled softly. Not fighting. Competing. Again and again. For what? For what everything wants, he said, placing the crown gently on the bench. To be understood. Lyra stepped forward, hesitant. The creatures noticed her. The lion bowed its head slightly. The stag reared antlers, flashing in the afternoon light. You've entered the trial of tension, the man said. Do I have to choose between them? Lyra asked. Only if you want to pass, he said. Or you can do what no one ever has. Listen. She turned to the lion first. It spoke not with words, but with echoes, like history unrolling inside her mind. Think, wait, watch. Feel the depth beneath the surface. Do not move until meaning anchors your feet. Then the stag. Its voice came like wind through a canyon, rushing, exhilarating, unstoppable. Leap, burn, dare. Feel the fire rise inside you. Do not wait while the world forgets your name. Lyra stepped back, overwhelmed. She sat in the grass, closed her eyes, and felt the pull. The lion reminded her of her quiet strength, the way she comforted others, her patient, listening, her careful questions, the way she had always waited for the right moment, even when it never came. The stag reminded her of every time she longed to scream, every time she wanted to leap before looking, every wild thought she'd buried beneath duty and silence. Two halves of the same longing. She opened her eyes. "I hear you both," she said aloud. The wind stilled. The lion sat. The stag lowered its head. "But I am not only you," she continued. "I am the choice between you. I am what lives in the middle." A soft rumble echoed from the lion. A high, piercing whistle rose from the stag. And then, without another step, the two creatures turned facing one another and bowed. The man in green clapped his hands slowly. "Well-spoken, flower bearer." Lyra looked down at her soul flower. It had changed again. Now the petals curled outward, like wings, silver on one side, gold on the other. The center pulsed with calm light, steady and warm. "Every path in Mirrorwell leads deeper into you," he said. "And sometimes the hardest truths are not about others, but about what you carry within." The sky above shimmered, then split like fabric, torn in the gentlest way. A staircase appeared carved from crystal thought. At the top, another square awaited. "Will they stop circling now?" she asked, turning to the lion and stag. He smiled sadly. "Only for a while. Balance, dear one, is not something we keep. It's something we return to again and again." Lyra climbed the stairs. With each step, she felt both grounded and light. When she reached the top, she looked back. The lion stood still, regal and deep. The stag shimmered at the edge of the wind, watching her with wild eyes. Both bowed one final time, then disappeared into mist. She turned toward the 7th square and walked on. The 7th square was unlike the others. There was no gate, no arch, no sign, just a stillness so perfect, so total, that even the breeze had stopped breathing. Lyra stood at the threshold, her soul flower glowing gently in her hand. The petals had grown wide and layered, now soft, with silver gold light. She no longer felt like a girl chasing a dream. She felt near something, near herself. She stepped forward. The sky above flickered once, like a candle being tested by wind, and then flooded with light. Fireworks made of crystal birds exploded in silence. 1,000 petals rained down from invisible branches. A golden path bloomed beneath her feet. At the far end stood a figure, tall, cloaked in midnight blue, her crown rising like a mountain of stars. Queen Elowin. But this time, her eyes were clear. "You've reached the 8th square." "Lyra," she said, "this is your coronation." Lyra's breath caught. I don't feel ready." "No one does," Elowin replied. "Even queens." The sky rang like a bell, and from either side of the square came a flurry of movement. A banquet table appeared absurdly long, filled with floating cakes, spinning cups of tea, spoons that danced in rhythm, and chairs that moved on their own. Lady Varel swept in from the right, twirling with laughter, her red cloak trailing sparks. Orin, the word-bound, appeared from a scroll of smoke, rearranging letters as he walked. Queen Isolde drifted in from a glimmer of time, her calendar gown rustling like forgotten memories. Even Echo and Mirror, the Echo twins, appeared, each holding a string of balloons made of thought. The lion and the stag stood at the far ends of the table, watching with solemn eyes. Everyone she had met was here. Everyone she had been was watching. Lyra stood at the head of the table, her heart thudding like thunder in a teacup. "Let the coronation of the Flower Queen begin," Lady Varel declared, and the crowd erupted into quiet applause like falling leaves clapping. A crown hovered down from the sky. It wasn't made of gold or jewels. It was made of light. But just as it reached Lyra'S brow, the ground trembled. The banquet table twisted. Chairs danced madly. The cakes exploded into confetti. The guests blurred and bled together like wet paint. From the center of the chaos came a sound laughter. Wild, echoing, unkind. A new voice. "You think you've earned a crown," the voice hissed. From the shadows stepped a mirror, not a person, just a mirror, floating. And in its glass, Lyra saw herself, not as she was now, but as she had been. Small, uncertain, afraid. "She's not a queen," the voice sneered. "She's a scared girl, pretending." The mirror shattered, then rebuilt itself, and the fragments showed other images. Lyra alone in her room. Lyra doubting her voice. Lyra letting others speak for her. "You've brought all your fears here," Queen Elowin said softly. "I didn't mean to," Lyra whispered. "They come with the crown," said Orin. "You don't wear it unless you face them." The mirror shrieked. "You don't deserve this." Lyra stepped toward it. Her flower pulsed. "I used to believe that," she said. The mirror cracked. "But I've walked through memory," she continued. "A fissure split down its center. I've chosen truth, kindness, courage, and balance." The mirror began to shiver. "I am not perfect," Lyra said, "but I am present, and that is enough." The mirror exploded. Light poured from the shards. The banquet table reassembled. The air cleared. Silence returned. Queen Elowin stepped forward, holding the crown of light. "It is time," she said. Lyra knelt. The crown descended, not onto her head, but into her chest. It sank into her heart, and from there bloomed outward. The petals of her soul flower unfolded fully, releasing a burst of color that lifted into the sky. The entire square inhaled and exhaled. A gentle hush fell. "She is crowned," said Elowin. "She is becoming," said Virel. "She is still herself," said Isolde. The guests bowed. Even the stars seemed to lean closer. Lyra stood, no longer holding the flower. She was the flower. She turned in a slow circle. The lion nodded. The stag stepped back into wind. Orin waved from behind a book that was writing itself. Echo and Mirror offered her the last of their balloons, and when she touched them, they vanished into sparks. The feast resumed. But Lyra knew the square was fading, not in sadness, but in completion. Queen Elowin stepped beside her. "There is one more step beyond the crown," Elowin smiled. "Beyond the dream." A new gate appeared, unmarked, unlabeled. No shimmer, no welcome, just stillness. Lyra turned back once. All the faces she loved were dissolving, and still her heart felt full. She stepped forward, into the gate, into the unknown. The final gate held no color, no crown, no call. It was simply there, and yet Lyra felt it watching her, not with eyes, but with knowing. It saw not what she had done, but who she had become. She stepped through, and the world fell away. There was no falling, no fear, just a softness, a surrender. Then came the silence, not empty, but sacred, a waiting, and within it, the mirror. It stood in the middle of nothing, floating, familiar. It was not the one she had entered all those lifetimes ago. This mirror was different. It was made of memory and moonlight, of echoes and endings. She approached slowly, her bare feet touching nothing, yet leaving warmth wherever she stepped. Within the mirror, she saw herself, not as she looked, but as she was. All the versions: the small girl, afraid to speak; the curious child asking too many questions; the quiet one who watched the world from behind; the fierce one who stood up when silence wouldn't do; the laughing one, the weeping one, the dreaming one. And now this one. She placed her palm against the glass, and the reflection did the same. But instead of resistance, the surface gave way, soft as breath, and she walked through. The warmth of a fire greeted her, the soft weight of a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, the ticking of a clock that finally ticked forward. Shadow. The cat purred softly at her side, and the mirror, it was just a mirror. Lyra sat still for a long while. The world she had returned to felt smaller somehow, and yet more sacred. She rose and moved to the window. Dawn had just begun to stretch its golden fingers across the sky. Trees shimmered with dew. The quiet hum of morning birds whispered promises to the day. She smiled and closed her eyes. Within her, the flower remained. She could feel it, not as an object, but as a knowing, a blooming at the center of herself. It pulsed, not with light now, but with meaning, and meaning, she realized, never fades. Someone knocked gently at her door. Her grandmother peeked in eyes soft with sleep. "You're up early, little dove." Lyra turned. "Not early," she said. "Just on time." The old woman chuckled, unaware of the galaxy that had unfolded while she slept. That day, Lyra walked slowly through the world, watching things she'd never truly seen before. The way the sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, the way the spoon stirred her tea with quiet circles, the way her feet touched the earth, and the earth touched back. She didn't speak much, but she listened, and when she did speak, her words came like petals, gentle, open, chosen. Days passed, but they felt different now, less hurried, more sacred. And though no one else saw the flower inside her, some people seemed to feel it. A friend stopped crying when Lyra simply sat beside her. A teacher paused mid-lesson and asked, "Have you always looked at people that way?" And a younger child whispered, "Your voice feels like the woods." She carried Mirror well in her presence, not by talking about it, but by becoming what it had taught her: kindness that reached backward and forward in time, courage that made no noise, balance that let her stand still in a spinning world, truth that glowed even when unspoken. One night, long after the stars had settled, Lyra returned to the mirror. It still hung above the fireplace, still framed in dust and moonlight, but it no longer shimmered with secrets. Instead, it waited. She leaned close, and for a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw someone else staring back. Not her reflection, but a girl not yet born, eyes wide, wondering, wandering, and Lyra whispered, "I'll be waiting," then turned away and walked softly into the night. If you ever see a mirror flicker, if you ever feel time slow in a garden, or a word press too gently against your heart to ignore, if a cat watches you with mismatched eyes, if a flower blooms in your dream, and you wake up remembering its warmth, then perhaps, just perhaps, you too have stepped into Mirrorwell, and maybe it never really let you go, not because it owned you, but because you were always meant to return, not to a place, but to yourself.